Anja Beran, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Inside the Manege.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I started this podcast because I wanted to help more riders learn from classical riders like you and really hear directly from, you about your work and your experience. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your ideas with everyone listening. So here we are on your beautiful farm, Gut Rosenhof, in the south of Germany.
Thanks, yes.
It's beautiful here. And so you're a classical rider and trainer. You've written several books in both German and English. You teach and you train horses here. And it's beautiful to watch you ride. Yesterday I had the chance to watch you working several horses.
Thank you.
And not only, technically and in the lightness with which you ride, but what actually struck me was the joy with which you ride. Some riders are very serious when they ride.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, I think, at the end of a very long day. And even then, you often had a big smile on your face.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to see someone who just has so much joy in what they do.
Yes, I really enjoy what I do. And imagine I work 7 days a week. I work Christmas and I have no holidays, so I always work because I love it. I ride around 11 horses a day, give 2 lessons. So if you want to do all this and you don't really love what you do, it's impossible.
There's so many things that I want to talk with you about today. So starting with this, you've dedicated your life to classical riding and teaching others in classical dressage. What would you say is the importance and the relevance of classical training today, and why should people listen to this conversation?
I think classical riding was not as important as it should be in the last years, but now it starts to be more interesting for more and more riders. And this is very, very good because we are really in a crisis because we lost the natural way to work with horses. And we ask horses to do really difficult things. It's the show jumping, it's the Grand Prix. It's really difficult. And if we lose the natural way how to train a horse, the horses suffer really a lot. If we ask unnatural movements, if we don't know how to get to these really classical movements, like for example Piaffe passage, and yes, when the knowledge is gone, I think many riders don't have, many trainers even don't have the knowledge how to bring a horse to do Piaffe and passage and enjoy the exercise. That's the point. Do it really brilliant, and both horse and rider should have fun doing this. And this we miss nowadays. And I think if horses should be part of our future and we want to continue riding, classical riding is the only way how we can keep the culture and yes, all these training horses alive. If no, I think one day it will maybe forbidden.
Yeah, I think this is a good point. I think there's a lot of criticism now and people really are starting to question normal or typical dressage training techniques. I think nowadays there's just a lot of different definitions of what classical riding really is. There's also the different schools. You have the French school, the German school, Austrian school, and so on. But in your own work, how would you define classical schooling of the horse?
For me, there are no different schools. Classical riding is the base of all, is the mother of everything. If you do show jumping, Western riding or anything, you have to do it classical. That means you should follow the nature of the horse. And of course, in the past, there was a little bit of difference between a French classical master and a German classical master, but that was dependent of the mentality of the master, because the French, of course, is a little bit maybe more artistic. The German is a little bit more strict. Everything has to be at the point. But nevertheless, all of them, they didn't lose the nature of the horse. And nowadays it's lost. That's the problem. So for me, there's only one way. It's the classical way. Of course, it can be a little bit different depending on the mentality of the trainer. But the classical way means that we respect the nature of the horse. We never ask for unnatural movements. if a horse shows something like this, for example, he starts to walk like a camel, then we know we lost the way, we did something really wrong. This should never ever happen. And the next thing belongs to a classical way for me is time. The horse tells us how long he needs to develop. And we never put the horse in a strict frame. In 3 months this, in 1 year he has to make this test, and in the second year this test. No, that doesn't exist for me. And it's just the horse who tells us he needs, maybe it starts with the breaking in already. There are horses you can break in without any stress in 2 months. There are others you need half year. And it depends always of the horse, and we should take the time nowadays, give the horse the time he needs, because we should never forget in history, it was the horse who helped the human being to develop. The horse made lots of things for us. He went into war for us. He was with the carriage. He made transports for us. So the horse was for everything. He worked in agriculture. And nowadays, we are not dependent, our life is not dependent of the horse anymore. So now we are in a happy situation. We can give the horse something back. All the centuries the horse suffered for us and worked for us, and now we can give him back and treat him as he needs.
Yeah, this is something I think that differentiates a lot of classical riders, because in the sport dressage world, often you have the time pressure, of getting a horse to compete at a certain level before a certain age, or they want the horse to be sold for a certain price, let's say, and then the horse needs to perform certain movements to meet that price, let's say. And in classical dressage, usually you don't compete, and you have the ability to give the horse as much time as you feel like the horse would benefit from.
Yes, but there's one thing, if you want to show the brilliant gaits of a horse very early, of course you put the horse under pressure, and that you should not do. And you want to sell him expensive and you just show the gaits. This is too fast. There is not good if you don't give the horse time. But another thing is, they say they are much more fast in training Piaffe and Passage with modern methods, because they don't know the old methods, of course. And this is not true. If the horse has a good basic training and a good gymnastic, makes a very good work in walk, what is completely forgotten, then I'm able to put the horse in Piaffe in a day, in 20 minutes. If the preparation is well done, it's like you make a good training with a ballet dancer, a good gymnastic, and then you tell him what is the name, split, no?
The splits.
Yeah, please now do it. Then he can do it because he's prepared. He can do it in a second. But if the ballet dancer or the horse is not well prepared and works really tense and under pressure, and then, of course, you need a long time, or you put him more under pressure to make split. Then you can make it immediately, but if you get up, then something is broken, a tendon or something. And this is what the horses always have. They always have problems at the legs, no? Because we ask things they are not prepared for.
So talking about the way that you train young horses and giving the horses really time in the beginning, how would you talk about the process you give for young horses versus the process they would go through in a typical dressage stable? Like, what are some of the differences? And especially when it comes to the slower work, like the work and walk you mentioned.
Yes, with the horses we break in, we don't do too much work in walk. It's too early, because first of all, it's important to put the horse forward, that he understands the meaning of the leg, go forward. But there's a big difference. And let me explain. The horse, when he's living free, he has a horizontal balance. So the horse is straight, neck long, nose forward, and he's moving around like this without any problems for all his life if you want. Okay, then is coming the moment we break the horse in. First of all, to break the horse in, there are two things. It's not only and always gymnastic. First, the horse needs education. You have to train him at ABC. You create a language that the horse can understand you. And there are things the horse has to learn. We always lunge the horse with a cabeçon, for example. So he learns if we say, oh, and use the cabeçon to slow down or to stop. And on the other side, he learns when we use voice and whip to go forward. So these are basic things the horse has to understand. And then we try to put the saddle on, all very calm, put the snaffle on, lunge him with the cabeçon, never with the lunge in the snaffle. And as soon as I see the horse moves in his natural balance as before, with the saddle on, the snaffle on a circle, then it's a good moment to put a rider on, because then he found his natural way to move and is relaxed with the saddle, so he's okay. Then I put the rider on at the lunge. And this rider does not, as you see often nowadays, taking reins, using legs. No, this rider is doing nothing. He's just on the horse, and the horse gets the time he needs to get used to the rider on his back. So he's very calm, he's just following the movements. No reins, no legs, nothing. And then I lunge the horse. The horse is, focused on the person on the ground, because he knows that. And I watch very well the face, the ears, and the tail of the horse, and of course the movements. And as soon as the horse moves again in his natural balance with the rider on, because he destroyed it, just putting our weight on the horse's back means the horse is falling on the forehand. So I lunge him until he's completely relaxed and moving in his natural way. And then we start to teach the horse the aids, because he doesn't know anything. So he always gets time for the next step, to be prepared and to be able to learn. Because when the horse is stressed and not in balance, because there's somebody on his back, he cannot learn. So we wait for the moment until he realizes, okay, now next step. And then is, for example, the next step, I tell the rider, we are in walk, let's go to trot, make just a short touch with your legs, bum, and I start the horse from the ground to trot. And the horse goes into trot, then the leg is doing nothing anymore, because the horse is in trot. We want to keep him fine and motivated. And little by little, I try to do less and less from the ground, and the horse understands, if the rider's leg makes a short touch, I have to go forward. And of course, the reins don't do anything in this moment. The way is free, and all the time the horse gets the chance to use his neck to find his balance. He has to put the nose really forward, long neck, to find his natural balance again. And then we teach the horse to slow down. So I ask with the cabeçon and voice, and the rider takes reins, takes reins, until the horse starts to understand, when he takes reins, I should slow down. The leg is not doing anything in this moment. So this is the basic. And then when I see the horse is listening to the rider, he knows to go forward, to turn, and to slow down, then I take cabeçon off and let the horse free. And now I think is the moment where the ways are completely different, because now the modern rider starts to put the neck and the head of the horse down and round and push with the legs and show the gaits. And we do the contrary. We let the neck free. We try to have a light contact, because it's in all books is written the horse should come to the bit, not the rider's hand. So we try to follow this rule. We give the horse all the freedom he needs, but of course we try to control the speed. We try to control if we make a circle, a diagonal, and these things. And we control the gait, of course. But the horse gets the freedom in the neck he needs to find the natural balance. And when he is in this horizontal balance and he understood the basic aids, then, only then, starts the gymnastic. And these are lateral movements. There are things, it's not a real lateral movement like leg yielding or overstepping, but it's a preparation for the true lateral movements. So this helps little by little to make the horse mobile, to take the stiffness away, to engage the hindquarters. Yes, and then you have a way of around 6-7 years in front of you where you engage the horse from behind. I don't like the way push. You engage him, And more the horse is engaged and is in balance, more the neck is coming up, the poll is getting higher, and the horse looks like more short, more round. And in the past, this moment was very important because the riders discovered that because they used the horses, for example, for war, that they can turn much easier, they can stop, they can start much more easy, almost without reins. They had the horses on the seat because they had weapons in the hand and so on. And this is an important moment, and it's not the moment especially only for the rider, it's a moment for the horse, because as soon as he is in this, let's say now, vertical balance, it's very healthy for the horse, because then he has on each leg the same weight. And that means that you don't, you don't overload one shoulder, for example, and then later you create a problem on this leg. And this is an important moment. So the way from a natural horizontal balance to vertical balance is about 6-7 years. And the rider is not the person who lifts the neck and head of the horse. No, it's the hindquarters lift the head and neck. And the rider just has to allow the horse to take the natural position. So if I give reins and be a little bit less in a positive body tension, so I relax also a little, the horse is getting longer, he can put the nose down, stretch the neck, he has a break. This you do a lot in between your training. You don't take reins, try to engage the horse and stay in this work and gymnastic for 60 minutes. No, of course you make many, many breaks and give reins, and that's the moment where the horse is stretching the head, the neck and head forward and a little bit down. Sounds easy, is very difficult to do.
As with most things in riding, I think.
Yeah, but I think we should understand this from the beginning. First, we need the natural balance again. Then we start with the gymnastic from behind to the front. The neck is the last part of the body that takes a nice position. It's Udo Bürger who said this, a German rider and veterinarian of the cavalry school in Hanover. And he wrote this in his book. And if you ride from the back to the front, the neck is automatically the last part of the horse's body that will take a nice position. So wait for it and let the horse. And today, what do we have? The horses are only 2 years old or 2.5. They make the stallion test, and the first they put in position is the neck. So they ride from the front to the back. And with this, they kill the back and the hindquarters.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because I think it's very tempting for riders to, if they don't have this knowledge, it's very tempting to see a finished horse and see the position of the neck. And then they think, maybe I can just use my hands to create that without using all of the foundation that actually led to that result. I want to go back to your mentioning of natural and unnatural movements. And one thing I know that you use in your work is the Spanish walk to develop a horse. And this is not so uncommon in classical riding, but for sport dressage riders, this could seem a little bit strange to use this as part of dressage training. Could you describe why you use it in your work and also what the effect it has on the horse?
Yeah. I come back to the Spanish walk immediately, but there's again a lot of knowledge lost, because let's take two things, the flying changes one by one and the Spanish walk. The Spanish walk is not part of the modern dressage tests, what is a pity. The flying changes one by one, they are. But the first rider who made them really, let's say, popular was François Boucher, and he made it in a French circus arena on a thoroughbred. And Boucher was, I don't know, I heard was a little bit arrogant, so there were some pupils or riders, they loved him, and others, they didn't like at all his methods. And of course, the ones who didn't like him, they said, this is completely unnatural. And in the Spanish riding school in Vienna, it was forbidden to do flying changes one by one for a long period. In Germany, riders like Gustav Rau, he said, no, this is not natural anymore. The horses lose the forward, they start to fall left, right. We don't do it, it's not a good not a good thing. And nowadays, this circus movement is part of the Grand Prix, and the Spanish walk not. So for me, both movements are natural. It can happen even when the horse is running free, that he changes the canter up 2 or 3 times, maybe not 15 times, but 2 times. And the Spanish walk, people think, is not natural because nowadays there are not many trainers or riders who work with stallions. If you have a stallion and it's coming a little bit closer to another, it's immediately the front leg coming out like this. And the stallions, 10 minutes ago, I put one on the field and he started in Spanish trot, natural. So it's a natural movement, first of all. And it makes sense. So if it has a gymnastic effect and is a natural movement, we can use it. And why it has a gymnastic effect? Because it gives freedom to the shoulder. So often I get horses really on the forehand, heavy in the front, and the walk is very short. The front leg is not really stepping forward. And these horses you can help to step more forward with the front leg, to get freedom in the shoulder, and to put the head and neck up a little when they are very deep. So this is first thing for the shoulder, head and neck position can be helpful. And of course, it's good for the balance, because when the right front leg is up in the air, then the left hind leg has also to go up because we want to go forward. Then we have 2 legs in the air, and now you can say in trot is the same. Yes, but here we are in walk and we don't have any speed, and the impulsion forward is not there. So for the horse is a moment of a balance problem maybe. So the horses learn to balance themselves and they learn to coordinate. So for me, it's a very helpful exercise. And I also had horses, Friesians, or one, for example, was a Trakehner stallion. In extended trot, he always puts now I don't know the English word for this in the front, for this joint. He just put this up. And he never stretched the front leg. So this Trakehner, I teach a little Spanish walk, and then I pushed him in trot more forward to get longer steps, and I put the whip to the shoulder, and suddenly he understood, he can use the front leg in another way. Or with many Friesians, it's the same. You push them forward in trot, and the front legs get higher, 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 but never forward. So like this, you can create another movement, what is also natural, but you can help the horse. And you can also use it for passage. If you have a horse not very talented, what I have normally, then it's difficult to put the Piaffe forward and wait for the first passage step. For example, I had a son of Franciscus, a German warmblood, was very easy. You do Piaffe, Piaffe, you go forward. He offers you the first step into passage, very easy. But you have other horses, not the power, not the strongness in the back, not so easy in the coordination. They offer you nothing. So if you do a collected trot and touch a little the front leg, the horse gets a moment of suspension, and when he understands, then you start to touch the hind legs. But you can make it easy for a horse to find the way to another natural movement like passage. So it's a very easy way for the horse, a very logical way.
I find a lot of riders, when they see things like this, or they notice that classical riders don't compete, for example, they'll often write off classical dressage as like a non-serious or sort of only for amateurs version of dressage. However, when there's a rider who has a horse in the sport dressage world who then has repeated injuries or the horse develops behavioral issues, it's really then at that point when they have run out of options, they've gone to so many trainers in this world and they haven't found a solution. Then they come to a classical trainer like yourself. And like you were saying before, is you get horses from this world who are heavy on the forehand and so on. And essentially they come to you for retraining and rehabilitation. Could you talk a little bit about what the issues are that these horses come with and how you go about retraining and rehabilitating them?
Mm-hmm. I'm very thankful for this because it's true. I'm always the last address. Because if you have a problem with the horse and you compete, you go to the person who wins, actually. You try there. Then you try at another very good address, also maybe a winner, and so on. And then you try 5, 6, 7 things maybe. And then at the end, they come here, but the horse has a long period of suffering already. And this is the reason why I learn so much. So I'm very happy to get these horses. And the problems, there are 3 problems all horses have. They are on the forehand. That means the back doesn't work. They are completely on the forehand, stiff. And they are behind the aids. They are not forward and not straight. And these things belong together. And this is the problem of every horse you get, no matter if he has the camel walk, he puts the tongue out, he's shaking the head and neck or anything, is always because of these 3 reasons. So what we have to do is, first of all, you throw away the Swedish noseband. It's a torture for horses. I don't know why old masters we had never said, hey, you are on a wrong way. No, people started to use it. And now they discovered it's a problem because they have blue tongues, blood in the mouth, and so on. And now there's coming up a rule that the old 2-finger rule gets maybe fashion again, but for the riders is a problem if you open this, because then they have to use their hands in another way, because they allow the horse to speak. And normally riding is a dialogue between horse's mouth, rider's fingers, not hands, fingers. And if they allow the horses to speak, the horse will tell the truth. So riders have a problem. So first of all, you open the noseband. To relax the horse is the first step, that he can use the jaw, open the mouth, and you move his tongue and these things.
I just want to clarify, the flash and the crank noseband, or you mean one or the other?
No, with the double bridle, you just have the upper thing. Yeah. But don't care, everything you close, you should not close tight. There should always be a space of 2 fingers between the horse's nose and this noseband. And with the double bridle is just 1, but they close it like crazy. That's really crazy. Yes, so first of all, you open this. And then you start with the gymnastic. If the horse allows, I try to do a little gymnastic in hand, because normally the back is damaged. So we try like overstepping, leg yielding after shouldering, rein back. Mostly they cannot do 1-step rein back. All these things we try. If the horse is not doesn't like the work in hand, is no problem. We do it with the rider on. And with all the gymnastic we do, we give the horse the most freedom possible for his neck. So we always try to engage the horse behind and let him free, that the neck can find his natural position. And then you often have horses, they start to shake the neck or throw it really up or to one side, and just let them. They do it because they want to get the tension out. And this is sometimes not nice to watch, but the horse needs it because he's in a rehabilitation modus. So let him, and then it's just work the horse from behind to the front. That is, use all the lateral movements, use the bending, go from one lateral movement to the next, from renvers to travers, make all the horse's body really supple, that the tension goes out. And then there comes a moment the horse starts to chew. And that's a very, very important moment, because then the back starts to work. As long as the horse doesn't speak and doesn't chew, the mouth is stiff, the neck is stiff, the shoulders are stiff, and the back is stiff. And the hindquarters are not really working. So this chewing is an important thing. This is why you see all the old monuments where you see riders on a horse, mostly in Piaffe or Passage, in front of castles or everywhere in the villages. The horses always have the mouth open. You will never find one with a closed mouth, never ever, because the horses speak. And so this is always the moment I'm waiting for when I get a horse for rehabilitation. As soon as they start speaking, it starts to be comfortable to work with them. And as long as they are stiff, they close the mouth and there's no reaction. Yes, and then it depends of the horse. I cannot say it's always a long way to go. Sometimes it's a thing of 3-4 weeks. Sometimes it's a thing of 3-4 years.
What do you think it is about the training they had before that was causing them to have issues like this?
Why they have this?
Yeah, what was it about, like let's say a typical dressage training or the training they had before they came to you, that caused them to have the issues that they did when they came?
There's always head down, neck round. They break the horses at the wither. The poll is never highest point, so the neck is round. But when you break a horse at the wither, you have no chance to have any influence on his back.
For people listening who might not know the term, can you explain what does it mean to break a horse at the wither?
When you make the neck round, the nose behind the vertical, and the poll is falling down. Then the horse looks round like a ball, but it's not really round because he's not engaged from the back to the front. Really round would be the neck is coming out big of the body, poll is highest point, and the nose is at the vertical or a little bit in front. But as soon as you put the nose behind the vertical and let fall down the poll, there is the horse is broken at the wither, we say, because then the rider has the impression the neck is very supple, because the neck in this moment has no power anymore. The neck is just moving left, right very easy because the muscles don't work. There's even no resistance. And then the riders think, it's comfortable. But they pay this with the back and the activity of the hindquarters. And then they think, if the hindquarters, they don't move, we push with the leg. That's why they push all the time. And then they throw even more weight on the forehand, and the horses are destroyed sooner than if they don't push.
Yeah, it disconnects the horse from the back to the front.
Yeah.
So coming to, again, modern dressage, one of the key ways they're often trained is in a long and low position.
Yeah.
They often say this is because they want to lift the back and stretch the top line of the horse.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this approach, and how do you find that it impacts the horse other than what you've already explained?
No, the back gets really short, and we have the impression sometimes that we sit higher in Piaffe. Then sometimes we feel we sit really on a tall horse. The horse is growing under us, because then the back is really short and is working. This is first of all, so it's collection that puts the back a little bit up and short. It's the collection. And of course, in between, if we train a horse, we cannot work always in collection. We make many breaks, as I explained. You give reins and the horse will stretch the neck. And then you have the stretch of the top line. But this is not a working position. It's a position to give the horse a break, to relax, and then you start to work the muscles again. So they made a mistake in interpretation. They think it's a working position with the head down. And if you listen very well to the thing I explained in the beginning, then we understand that the rider never ever has to put the neck of the horse up or down, because the horse has the natural long position of neck as long as the hind leg is pushing forward in a natural way. So hind leg is pushing forward in long steps, neck is long, nose forward. As soon as you engage the hind leg to carry weight and to go more up and less forward, the neck is coming up, natural, the poll is highest point, the horse is more short. So the neck always makes what the hind leg is doing. So we should be concentrated on the hind leg. The only thing we have to do with the reins is to give flexion or bending to get the horse more straight, to help to take some stiffness away, to help the asymmetry of the horse. Yes, we have to put left, right. We have to release the reins that he can stretch. But if you get a horse 3 years old from the field and start to train him, there's never a moment you put the head up or down. Never, ever. Of course, nowadays I often tell the pupils, hands up, put the head up, because the horse was maybe 2 years ridden forward and down and is going around on the forehand with a hanging neck, and you have to help him to find a natural position again. Yes, but if you have a horse without any stories before, don't put the neck up or down. The horse puts the neck in the good position. And here we are at the point, why are doing so many dressage horses the camel walk? Why?
Handling, yeah.
Yeah, why? Because they take reins short in walk, and that's the moment the walk should slow down and the hind leg starts to carry weight. No, they take reins, push with the leg, and they want to show the long and beautiful walk the horse has, but with a short neck. And this is against nature. The horse cannot do long steps with a short neck. As soon as the hind legs push forward, the horse has to open the frame. So if I don't let him, he starts to contract the back, and then he's in camel walk. Very simple, very simple. So if I take reins, I grow a little myself, and the horse is coming back and he has to slow down. And that's what they don't understand, because they think a short walk is a bad walk. No, a short walk is very difficult to ride. A collected walk can be really beautiful when the horse is completely in balance. The horse is full of vibration, is waiting what we are doing next. So the energy is collected. That is what is collection. The energy is there and you can let it out. But a walk that is pushing forward, you can't do anything out of this walk. You can show the natural movement of the horse, but you cannot start into canter or anything, not in a good canter, out of these long steps. But if you ask for long steps, let the neck long.
A few years ago, you made a very interesting video talking about the faults you were also seeing in Piaffe, Passage and extended trot, for example. And this was even in high levels of competition with dressage horses. Could you talk a little bit about what the faults were that you were seeing also? Because I think it's connected to what you're saying also.
Yes.
And what you would define, for example, as an ideal form of those movements.
Yeah, first of all, we have to say that that is what I've been talking about just now, is the frame. The horse, as I said, long steps, long neck, short steps. The same we have in trot. If you want extended trot, open your fingers, the horse needs another frame. Nowadays, you see every Grand Prix horse doing passage and extended trot with the same neck. This is impossible, it's against nature. As soon as he makes extended trot, he needs the neck in a longer position. Give reins. And for passage, the horse will come back to you and will show the neck himself. So let him. So this is the first thing, is the frame. We don't see horses in different frames. They do different movements, always with the same neck. First mistake. And then you see many Piaffes, or you see the problems in walk, of course. You see many Piaffes not diagonal, on the forehand, croup up, croup highest point, hanging pole, nose behind the vertical, rider's spurs in the, Schabracke, in the
saddle pad.
So, yeah, so not a long leg. And yes, the horses are hanging on the forehand. Why? Because they had no gymnastic in lateral movements, no gymnastic in walk. The gymnastic in walk is the basic work for everything, for all collected movements. And because the step from collected walk to diagonal steps the step is very, very small. For the horse, it's very easy. But if you don't put the collected walk into your daily training, you have a problem with Piaffe Passage. Yeah, and then they have the horses mostly not diagonal. And we made movies. And then, of course, we made all the horses black. And we made one diagonal leg pair blue and one red, and made it a little in slow motion to see really what happens. Because if you watch it like this, you think, there's something not correct, but you cannot really say it's this or that. And when you see it in slow motion, you see it's not just not diagonal. You see that every leg is doing different things. There are hind legs, make a small circle in the air. There are front legs, they touch the ground, go up, and then go down again, and things like this. And if you see this, then you know the movement is not natural anymore, that doesn't exist. And then you have maybe an idea, or you can imagine how it was trained. Because how is an unnatural movement coming out with unnatural training methods?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what you're saying in terms of pushing a lot from behind, but then holding in front. And this ends up with a horse that is very, very contracted and squished essentially between the aids.
Yeah.
So one thing connected to this is the contact and different ideas of what contact is.
Yeah.
So in modern dressage, they talk about this a lot, but also in classical dressage.
Yeah.
And how would you define, an ideal contact, and how do you go about developing this in the horses that you train?
Because that fits to this, before we talk about this, let me say one word to the passage, because the passage nowadays doesn't exist anymore. because a passage, and when you watch the Grand Prix, you will see it very well. A passage means that the hind leg of the horse goes up, forward in the air and down. And the front leg makes the same, goes up, forward and down. So this is the moment of suspension, and it's a really very collected movement forward. Nowadays, you always see the hind leg goes up, is waiting a little in the air, goes just a little bit forward. The front leg goes up, forward, because it's natural. Then the front leg or the horse feels, oh, the hind leg doesn't come. So I put my front leg back in the air and then back to the ground. So you see all horses doing passage with front legs up, forward, backwards, down, what is completely unnatural, because not one animal in the world would move forward in taking legs backwards. This is completely against nature. How this can happen? It's very easy. For example, that's why the modern rider needs a horse really hot and full of energy. With a normal lazy horse, he can't work. So you need a hot horse. You go on the diagonal, you push the horse to an extended trot, and at the end of the diagonal, just an example, you take reins, but you push with the legs. So the hind leg goes up, wants to go forward, the hand says no. So the hind leg has a problem because it has to stay in the air. So some hind legs make a small circle, some make a funny movement with the joint or anything. And the front leg was already on the way, and the front leg said, oh, I have to go back because the hand says, no, don't go. So you create an artificial moment of suspension and you destroy the natural movement. And of course, the back is not involved at all. In this moment, it starts to be a leg movement, an artificial leg movement, but without being trained from the back to the front and included the back. No, nothing. And with these types of, call it passage, but it's not, you get even notes and you can win. This is the sad thing. And now let's talk about the contact. The contact is something when the horse is young, we take a light contact and we offer the horse to get a little in touch with our hand, to be able to turn the horse, to slow down, and all these things are important. The horse has to learn. So we give him a little bit a frame, but we allow him a neck position necessary for him to find his balance. So we don't manipulate the neck, we just take influence on the speed, on the direction, and these things. And then, of course, we start to engage the horse with the lateral movement. So we start with our contact to bend the horse, to give flexion. Always at the end, we want a little bit more contact on the outside rein than on the inside, and so on, to give the horse, a border with the outside rein, and to make the transitions with the outside rein and things like this. And during the training and the years, the contact should get more and more light. And this is the first who said, at the end you just have the weight of the reins in your hand and nothing more. And who said you need to give up completely the contact was La Guérinière, who was talking about the Descente des mains et des jambes, and who said, in the moment you feel the horse is in balance, give up the contact completely, don't do anything with your leg, to see if the horse is really in self-carriage and engaged, or if he's just between your hands and legs, because then it's not correct. And why did he say this? Because they used the horses for war, and they were dependent of using the weapon and forget about the reins, and the horse cannot fall on the shoulders, or you are not able to stop him or anything just because you give up the reins. So it was a thing to survive was important. And on the other side, he said, it's for the horse a reward. The horse feels that we trust him, and the horse at the same time wants to be more brilliant, wants to show himself, is proud of himself because we release him. So it's two positive effects. For the rider is a test, is the horse independent of the rein but dependent of my seat? And for the horse is a reward, so do it. This call it method or however, doesn't exist in modern dressage tests. That would be the first thing I would put in Piaffe for 5 steps. Give up the reins, don't do anything with the legs, and let's see if your horse continues dancing. This is a very important point to change the ideas, the mentality of the rider who thinks this is only under pressure and with tension. No, let the horse grow, let him show himself, let him be proud. So this is one thing he said, but you also can read it in our German masters. Read Udo Bürger is a very important guy for me, and he has a very good language. You can understand the books very easy. He said, the best contact at the end of the training is the contact that doesn't exist anymore. And if you would be able to ride the whole dressage test without any contact, you are a really good rider. Imagine today in a Grand Prix, you throw away the reins. You get minus because they don't like it. Why they don't like it? Because the worst thing can happen is that the horse puts the nose backwards and the reins get loose, because then the horse is behind the bit. This is the worst thing. But if the rider is giving up the contact and the horse stays forward, it's the best we can do. So good and bad are very close together. But to be always sure there's no hanging and no loose rein, they put it all out. But for me, a judge of Grand Prix should be able to see if the horse or the rider has given up the contact. And when it was the rider, it's the best that can happen.
Can you go a little bit more into how do you develop this in your horses? I mean, compared to, let's say, typical training where they really put a lot of emphasis on a constant contact and they connect this often with the engagement of the hind legs. Can you talk about how do you create this nice soft but stable contact and then develop the horse to the point where you're able to do the descente des mains des jambes, this is the release of the hand and the leg, and allow or even test the horse, is he in self-carriage, and allow him to do the exercise.
Yeah. I test it all the time. I start already with the young horses, for example, when they are 5 years old and they do their first travers, and I see the bending is good, I give up the inside rein, just for me to see if the horse is really bended or if I just hold him with my inside rein in the position. Then later you do the half pass, I give up the contact with the inside rein. I want to see what's going on. So for me, I make these tests all the time, and the horse, when he's trained in balance, he reacts very well. He stays in position. He shows me that he doesn't need the rein, and this is the point. But let's speak a little bit about the seat, because you can't do this without seat. If you have no back muscles, no belly muscles, then you leave the horse completely alone. No seat, no rein, no leg. The horse will fall on the shoulders immediately. But when the horse is really dependent of your seat and you have a seat, you use your muscles and you don't give up your body tension, then you can work without hands and legs, or with less, let's say. Without is not possible, but with less. But this is also one thing we should create or work on, is the rider's seat. This is that belongs together. You cannot say I ride with loose reins and the horse is in self-carriage, but I hang on the horse. No, you have to sit, really.
You've written an entire book on the seat.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure we could spend an entire episode just talking about the seat. But just to talk about it briefly here, what do you think are some things about the seat that most riders don't even realize, like the influence that they can have with their seat and what they could develop?
First of all, we should get aware that we want to influence 650 kilo body with our, 60 kilo or whatever. So that means if we want to take influence, first of all, we have to coordinate our own body. We should be sure that we are straight. So we need a physiotherapist who tells us if we are really straight, if the back is okay. If no, we cannot have any positive influence on the horse. If we are ourselves, the rider, are not straight, the horse will be not straight at all. So be straight. And then, of course, you need muscles in the belly, you need muscles in the back, and you need the capacity to relax your legs and arms completely, but stay in a positive tension in the, how do you say, in the middle of your body.
Abdomen, yeah.
Yeah,
in your
and
belly.
this is what many people cannot. People who make ballet or dancing or a lot of gymnastic, they are able to do it, but people not sporty at all, for them it's really a problem, because often I tell them relax a little because they have tense arms and shoulders, and then the whole rider is whoop, and there is no tension in any muscle anymore. And then I say, no, you need a little back and belly muscles, grow a little on the horse. Then legs, arms, everything, belly, everything is completely tense. And this is important, that we learn to coordinate our body, that we get body awareness. And then, of course, it's a lot of feeling also, and a lot of practice.
It takes time to develop, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Another thing that affects contact a lot, and you talk about a lot, is straightness and straightening horses. This is the preoccupation, I think, of most dressage riders, because every horse is a little bit crooked by nature.
Of course.
But for the riders who maybe this is a new concept, could you talk about the natural crookedness of horses and how you go about straightening a crooked horse?
Yes, first of all, I have to say the German warmblood is much more straight than some of the old breeds, or how do you say, horses a little bit closer to the nature, like, for example, the Haflinger, or the how do you say, Norway pony, and all these horses, or the Baroque horses, they really have problems with the crookedness. And the German warmblood is, or nowadays is the modern sports horse, is not only the German, is much more straightforward and straight. So if you don't care about the crookedness with the German warmblood, normally you can survive and you can even have results. If you don't care about the crookedness with, for example, an Iberian horse, you will damage the horse very soon and you will not have good results. Sometimes the crookedness of the warmbloods you can see in the Piaffe. The diagonals don't work in the same way. There you can see it's coming out a little bit. But of course, to keep the horse healthy, the rider should care about the crookedness. And first of all, and I talk again about Udo Berger, he says you need an analysis. So lunge the horse with the cabeçon. Don't use any auxiliary reins or something. Watch the horse, how he is using his body himself, watch him. And then you see, maybe all the time he's looking only to the left. To the right, he never puts the nose. The neck is very deep, or all the time very high. And these things are important to make a training concept for especially this horse. So first analyzes where is the stiff side and where is, I say, the hollow side. So the hollow side is where the horse is bending himself. So for example, the horse is always looking to the left, the neck is bended to the left, and often the hindquarters are also hanging on the left. So it's like a banana bended to the left. So then you have to do everything to bend this banana to the right to get it straight. So for example, what I don't do is shoulder in left with the horse like this, because he can bend himself anyway to the left. And the problem is with this bending to the left, he has all the weight on the right shoulder normally. So if I ride him from left to right, I push more weight to the right front leg and to the right shoulder. So this leg will be overloaded and will get a problem sooner or later. So I let this away. I do only shoulder in from right to left to help the horse to get bended to the other side, to stretch. Most of the time the muscles of the hollow side are too short already, to stretch these muscles, to engage the hind leg, the right one, and to put weight from the right front leg to the left, to involve the left front leg a little into the movement. And this is the training concept. How to put a horse straight is just an example. The shoulder in, you have many things. You have the travers rond where you can use leg yielding. You have many things, all the tools of classical exercises you can use to put the horse straight. But it's never a solution to pull on the rein on the stiff side and use leg. This is not the solution, because the horse is not against us riders or against the aids. No, not at all. It's just the body doesn't allow him to turn the head to the right. So it's sometimes a very, let's say, do you say primitive reaction? The rider feels, the horse is leaning on the right rein, so I pull, pull, pull. Now it's getting better. Yes, why it's getting better? Because the more clever sometimes is giving up, and it's the horse. But this has nothing to do with gymnastic or fair training. Fair training is to start to bend him to this side. And that includes that he cannot do, for example, the shoulder in to the right for 2, 3, 4 weeks in a good way. So you just get a very light bending because he cannot give you more. He needs a break. You ask again, very light bending, give him a break. And this is gymnastic. And little by little, you ask very polite with your finger, not with your arm, to turn the head, to turn the neck. And little by little, you feel, he starts chewing and he can bend more and more because the muscle of the other side starts to stretch. So we need maybe 3, 4 months to get a nice shoulder in on the right. But then we are really we made one step forward in our training. And there's another thing we should not forget, because we always talk about the horse's body and so on. The horse has also a mind, a head. And when we work like this, that's why my horses, they are really always with the ears and the head on me. They feel that we help them. We work with them and not against them. If you pull on the rein where he's stiff, the horse doesn't understand anything because he wants to do what you want, but he cannot. So he feels the guy in the saddle is my enemy. He works against me. After the lesson, I feel tired. I didn't understand anything. But if you work in a classical way, the horse feels, oh, she helps me. I feel better after the lesson. She's nice. The horse will not think she's polite, but the horse will feel that you do it in very small steps. He gets a break when he needs it. So the horses feel they work with me. We have a cooperation. We try to create something together. And that's the point.
Yeah, I also experienced this actually when I switched to classical riding. Is you really notice that the horses start to notice this, and they start to really look to you more for guidance when they start to build that trust with you, because of the way that you're working with them. I think as riders, we continue to learn our entire lives. You can never stop learning and riding. And this brings me to where we are now, which is in your library. We're surrounded by, hundreds of books on horses and classical dressage. I think for a lot of riders, they can assume that they can become the best rider just by riding and never looking at a book. And this is one way that you can do it, but I think there's so much value in reading and studying dressage. And I think this is it's been a little bit forgotten. Given that you have such a beautiful, extensive library, could you talk a little bit about, what you've gotten out of reading and studying dressage in your own career?
Yes.
And what you would recommend for others?
In the beginning, I was not interested in reading too much. I was just riding. But I always liked books, and I always bought lots of books because I like to see the photos. And I was judging only with the photos who is maybe a good rider and what I don't like. And so, for example, I came to Nuno Oliveira just seeing the photos. I said, whoa, that should be good. But I was not reading, to be honest. So I was just riding. And after some years, this is also something I have to say, there are so many riders between 20 and 30 years old or beginning of 30, they are working alone. They don't know anything or not too much. Because when I think now back to the time where I've been 30, I know now that I didn't know anything. And I just can tell them, go to somebody a little bit more experienced, ask for advice. Don't think you can solve the problem. And then many, they don't know how to continue because they feel, poof, it doesn't work. Then they start to give massage to the horse and this and this. Then they are looking for things around that it will work. But the truth is the riding, the knowledge they have is not enough. This is the problem. So that was the same, of course, with me. And then I started reading. And then it was very funny because sometimes I always like to ride very difficult horses and horses with lame, where the vets didn't know where it's from. And I tried to put them straight, and often then they moved normal and not lame anymore. So I discovered this, and then I started reading, and then I saw, there are other guys, they discovered this many, many years before me. So that's good. And then you start to understand, because sometimes you read something, for example, Udo Berger again, he said, dressage is nothing else than gymnastic to help the horse. If the horse is really not very well and has a problem or is lame, the rider is the physiotherapist for the horse. So dressage gets, how do you say, gymnastic for rehabilitation. So it's a little bit more difficult, but it works. And then I made my experience. I said, yes, he's right. But if you read this without having a horse with problems, you say, yeah, okay, interesting. But if I need a physiotherapist, I call a guy to give a massage to the horse. No, completely wrong. You don't need it. Then the shoulder in to the right doesn't work because the horse completely hollow left. You do this. And suddenly he works in a rhythm and normal. And then you discover what you can do with gymnastic and that you are the physiotherapist. But if you read it, it gives you a little bit more confidence, or you know, I'm on the way, go on. So reading is very important.
Yeah, I've learned so much by reading. I mean, of course, you always need to ride, and this is the number one thing, but you learn so much from reading about the work of, hundreds of riders that came before you because they had similar issues,
Yeah.
You mentioned that you like challenging horses. Could you talk about maybe one horse that you found particularly challenging? What his issues were and what the process was that you went through and what helped them in the end?
I had really many with impossible problems. But one was really, that was the story. He arrived with a difference in the hip of more than 12 or 13 centimeters. So one side was really hanging down. And first the owner was here and he said, I have a horse, the hip is like this. And I was with 4 vets and they made X-rays and many things. And they said the horse, even on the field, he cannot walk anymore. And we should find an end because he cannot have a nice life on the field and riding is over, is not possible anymore. But the 4 vets had 4 different diagnoses. And then the owner starts to think, this says, this vet says this, the muscle have a problem, the other one said the bone has a problem, the other one says the bone was broken and is now in a wrong position. And he said, maybe all this is not correct. And then he asked me if I can try. And I said, I was young, I said, of course. And then he came with the trailer, he opened the trailer and the horse couldn't get out of the trailer, he couldn't go backwards. And then I saw the hoof, half of the hoof was gone because he couldn't lift the hind leg. And when it went forward very slow and was slipping, no?
Sliding
on the ground, so half of the hoof was gone. And I said, okay, I don't know. And then we put him in the first box very close to the arena that I have just a short way. But the horse, the face was not sad and he was interested. I said, okay, we try. So I took him out in the beginning 5 times a day and just tried work in hand from this stiff side to the other side. So I always touched the hind leg, he couldn't move, to get a little bit by side. And when he made just a small step, I praised him, I tried again, back in the box, and this 5 times. Yes, and like this I started. And now it's a long story, but I can tell you at the end, after it was less than a year, the hip had a difference of 2 centimeters only.
Wow.
The horse was fine, the hoof starts to be normal. And then I started to train the horse. The horse made Piaffe passage, a flying change, a pirouette, and the guy was hacking every weekend with him. He was here for more than 10 years after this and never ever a problem. And then I thought, wow, what classical gymnastic can do. That's really unbelievable. And how many horses are sent to heaven because of wrong diagnosis or just bad gymnastic, asymmetry in the body, or even I don't know what he had in his hip. I have no idea. But in fact, the training and to build up muscles and the gymnastic helped him to find the center, and he was okay.
Yeah, this is incredible. I feel like there's so many stories like this, but I think, you know, people would be so surprised to hear stories like this. You know, if this is really the things that happen with when you train a horse classically, you know, and you are able to gymnasticize the horse, then even if they have, sort of, for example, very strange gaits, I've also seen this, is then sometimes it takes a lot of time, but let's say a year or two later, then all of a sudden they can move like a normal horse.
Yeah.
And you think, is this even the same horse?
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
And you have these stories also with the tongue out. Tongue out, and then they arrive. We put this noseband and that noseband and this bit, and there's another bit, and not broken and broken. I said, okay, give me the horse, throw your nosebands away, we just put a snaffle. And this is, I have to say something, nowadays you have to be careful, because then you start riding a horse like this and the tongue is hanging out. That's why I don't like nowadays, normally I was always very open, people coming, just watching 10 minutes and go away. Then they come, they see, Beran, she's riding with the tongue out, not nice, ciao. No, of course I let him the tongue out if he wants. So I start with the snaffle and I don't care about the tongue and the mouth, and I start to work the horse from behind, engage him, overstepping, shouldering, travers, and so on. And this horse, he had for a long period the tongue hanging out completely to the left. And I said, this will be a story. With the lateral movements, he started to chew a little. The tongue was in, but if you have given up the contact, tongue was out immediately. And then I started, because he was mobile, I started to Piaffe him. And during Piaffe, he starts chewing. And the tongue, of course, is in. He cannot chew with the tongue out. And in the moment the horse made his first Piaffe step, the tongue went in and never, also this horse was 10 years here, never out again. Even I couldn't believe. So it's so strange sometimes, but I had these things 100 times. And yes, it was always successful. And yes, you can help the horses a lot with dressage, and you should not destroy them with dressage. It's another
the
sense.
opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's for keeping them healthy, you know, it's supposed to keep them in the best condition possible. And I think you bring up such an important point, is so many riders, again, as people are becoming more critical of riding methods, which is for a good reason, but a lot of people fall into the habit of just looking for 10 minutes, like you say. They have no idea about the horse's history, what the rider is doing with the horse, and they assume that it's not good. But you need to really look at it, you know, over years and really understand the situation in order to actually understand what's going on.
That's an important point. That's why I stayed with my trainers with 116 and 126 years, because people think they make a weekend clinic and then they understand the way the master is training. You don't understand anything. And this is the point. You have to follow years and years. The best is if you can see when he starts horses with 3 years old until they are 9 or 10, then you can see, with this horse it worked, and see if he has old horses. We have so many horses here, more than 27 years old. The oldest actually is 31. We had last year one with 35, still doing walk, trot and canter, still standing with the farrier with the leg up without any problem. So that means he was all his life elastic, well, had a good gymnastic, and so at 35 he was there with the farrier, leg up, and he could do his work. So this is helpful for many other things in a horse's life also. The good training is not just the moment under the saddle.
So now you are at a point where you have many, many, many years and many hours in the saddle behind you. I want to ask, because you are obviously very experienced, what are you still learning? What are you working on now? What are you developing?
Every day I work on my seat. Every day I work on more lightness. Yeah, because this is maybe a way to develop, because for example, when you are 18, you are happy, you do walk and you start canter and hey, it worked. You are happy, no? I'm the biggest in the world. I make walk canter. And then later you discover how you can do it better and better and better. And now with almost 56, I have to say it's very rare that I'm happy with the start from walk to canter. I always see a problem or something that can be done even better. And you develop, if you ask yourself always, is there a way to do it even more fine, less aids, Was it really in balance? Did the horse not fall on the forehand? And these things. So I work on this every day. For example, I discovered now the position of poll is really one of the most important things. Poll highest point means that the horse is really forward, ridden from the back to the front and not on the forehand, and that the back works. As soon as the poll is hanging, it's all not good. And then I'm somebody who likes to watch photos. Then I watch photos on old books, and you see all the horses with the poll really up. They are really collected and sitting. And as soon as the poll is not up, it's over. That does not mean that you put the poll up with your hands and be happy that you carry the horse's head up there. No, has nothing to do with this.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point in case anyone tries to do that after watching this.
We should say this sentence also.
Anja, if people are inspired by what they've heard listening to this episode, how can they continue to learn from you and your work?
Yes, in the past I traveled a lot. I traveled to United States and the Emirates and UK and everywhere. But I'm a little bit tired of this. And the truth is I give some clinics, but not too many. And I have here in our home, on our farm, during spring, summer, autumn, we do Sunday morning training where everybody can come and watch, and I explain what we do and why, explain the problems of the horses. I have some seminars outside where we bring horses, and I make lectures and make a demonstration with our horses. And the most important thing for me, and I was completely against this, are our online courses. Because, of course, we developed this during Corona time, and I was completely against because I said people cannot learn riding in front of a computer. It's completely stupid. But then we really made it in detail, and we made movies of horses, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. And we tried always, because we have here always around 50 horses, to film a horse who cannot do it, not at all, who just starts a little, makes it better, makes it good, and the horse who has problems. So we try to show all different things that can happen. And then I try to explain all this very well. And the truth is, at the end, we had pupils who bought this online course, and they sent me videos from before and after. And I also said, it's another horse, another rider. It was a big difference. And we have, of course, different topics. For example, work and walk, what is almost forgotten, or lateral movements, or canter work, or whatever. And we really go in detail. We are talking about the horse, the position, the seat, the feeling, everything. And the riders also could, in a closed Facebook group, ask questions. So I think this is really helpful, and it's a way to learn or to get more inside view into classical training, even if you live far away, because we have pupils in Australia, New Zealand, everywhere. But this is a thing we can get connected.
Anja Beran, thank you so much for your time and being on this podcast and sharing your ideas with everyone listening. I really appreciate the work that you do and the way that you approach riding, the way you share your insights in a very carefully thought through and structured way that makes it super easy to understand.
Yes, that's what I like, to make the things easy, because the truth is they are difficult enough. So yeah, first of all, we should understand what we want to achieve or how it works. And then when we practice, we see it's not as easy. But to get a concept, we have to understand. And that's why I like to explain it in a very easy way.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to thank you for continuing to share your work in classical dressage with everyone listening.
Thank you very much.